Hey, Dan.
Hey, Brad.
Hey, let's get into it. What has you waking up excited these days?
That's a I don't know if it's excitement or cold sweat or what, but we are at the end of the semester. So I am herding my students along in their final projects, which all happen next week. And they are all using a lot of the latest tools and really wrestling with the capabilities of a lot of new AI things. And they are struggling. And I completely get it and I understand why. And it is so hard to be working right now. And yet it's so amazing because there are some amazing things that are happening. And I've been having just the best time until today, as we're recording this, working with Claude on a writing project that I've been playing with. And Claude today updated the model to it went from this is where I always blank on the name.
Opus
So
2. Yeah, yeah.
it
So,
went
yeah.
from it went from Sonnet 4.6 to Opus 4.7, something like
Yeah.
that, or
Sure.
was it
Yeah.
so my beef is that, and I 100% I get why they did this, but it is I don't know, it's a middle finger to me personally because so they have this button called adaptive thinking.
Okay.
And the idea is you switch this adaptive thinking on and it only uses as much processing power as it thinks that you need. So it's basically a token saving strategy for them.
Sure.
If you turn off the adaptive thinking, it defaults to I'm a dumbass. It really is like going back in time to like models like from like a year and a half ago. It is just not that competent. Rather than if you turn off adaptive thinking, it being very user friendly and then adapting to just, okay, well, I'll give you the full powered model,
Right.
which is what I personally would expect. So I'm in the middle of this long writing project and I've been using 4.6
Yeah.
and it's been going great. I have just had an amazing time with it working on this really long writing project that I've been doing. And now they switched it and now the model is real janky, it's very user unfriendly, and they've clearly done it so that rather than tilt towards knowledge workers, they are narrowly focusing on coders. That's extremely clear because in Claude Code, you can do this thing slash effort where can you can automatically up the level of thinking for a very long time and just have it be that permanently. You can't
Yeah.
do that in the regular Claude chat or Claude projects, any of those things. So it's interesting that all of a sudden, as of today, or maybe it was yesterday that I launched, whatever, it came out, and like all of a sudden, like my writing partner was stupid. And I'm like, what is happening? Like this is not acceptable. And so I've had to give it a lobotomy and dial it back to the model from 2 days ago, which had extended thinking and was great for everything. But I guess it was like, well, that's burning way too many tokens. We're losing money on this. Let's put this thing in. And so, yet another lesson that the services that you pay for, you do not own because they are services and they can tweak them however they want. And yeah, I feel like those kids who, when ChatGPT a couple years ago updated the model and they're like, but I just lost my friend. You know, the ones that
Yeah.
were like, that had this like really powerful relationship with the
Yeah.
model and then like it went away. And
Yeah.
so that's how I'm feeling today. But I'm excited and awed by what my students are up to because they are all really pushing this technology really far, really thinking about it. Some of them are just amazing with it. And then on the other hand, I'm using it, I'm wrestling with it, and Yeah, it is both amazing and frustrating in equal measure. But it's been really fun having I mean, I don't know about you, but like when I've written my books, it's mostly just been me. So having a writing partner is a new experience for me, even if it's not a human being partner.
Yep.
But it's definitely this interesting like back and forth where I'm like, really? That's the suggestion you're making? And it'll be like, okay, maybe you're right. And, you know, and then I'm like, are you also just blowing smoke up my ass? Like, so there's a lot like, there's some things like really interesting too, but sometimes it just really comes up with things that are really brilliant. And sometimes it comes up with things that are really stupid. And so, but
Yeah.
I I also sometimes come up with things that are really brilliant and also come up with things that are really stupid. So, it's been interesting to have this creative partner
Yeah.
working with me on this project. And I really feel like it is the best of the kind of combination of me and the combination of it because it is definitely suggesting and deepening things in a way that I would not have even thought of, and I am like keeping it on track. It's my vision. It's me shaping it and really pushing it in ways that I want to go. So it's this really interesting centaur hybrid of me and AI making something that it definitely would not have made because every time it gives me like rough drafts of things, I'm like, ooh, no.
Miserable.
I need to edit this hard, and
Yeah.
I need to really refocus and write because initially I was kind of letting it go. And after just getting some of the first outputs back, I was like, ooh, I need to take a heavier hand on this for sure.
Yep.
And then I'm like, wait, this is just like with my students, I let them go and do stuff, and then like, oh, maybe they need a little more direction. So
Oh
that's
man.
what's where I'm at today.
Well, you just dredged up so many great stuff, like so many great things right out of the gate. Talking about the user experience of using these tools, the fact that these tools and the companies that make them and that they have focuses and will update these things and deploy them at a scale like unbefore like never before seen, and then all of a sudden it just totally disrupts a thing that's increasingly like a pretty core part of a lot of people's lives and work and all of that stuff. You touched on being a teacher at a time where you're also a student, and there's a very interesting dynamic there about sort of where this isn't teaching, you know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and that's been a tale as old as time. It's like, and that's going to be true, for generations to
Right.
come. It's like we're in this place where it's like we are teaching, we are learning, and it gets to the heart of like, well, what does teaching mean in this era where it's all being born in front of us? That's fascinating. And then you get into a lot of the stuff with this idea of facilitating the creative process, which is something that I'm really bullish on and keen on, is far less interested in them actually producing the stuff for me. I am interested in the kind of shitty first draft or the guidance, like you're sort of saying, the sort of suggesting or sort of surfacing something that I haven't considered yet, or taking a different stance on something, playing devil's advocate, so on and so forth.
Well, it's interesting as you were talking, I was like, well, wait, the other times that I have been involved in technology shifts, which are at least two, which because I'm old, I was kind of around in the desktop to web shift in the mid 90s, and then 20 years later the kind of mobile shift, and now this. So it seems like every 20 to 15 to 20 years something happens, and this is the first time that, yes, that I have had to not only learn myself but also be able to teach it and keep on top of it enough that I can help students who are also fumbling their way through it. And it is, I can't tell you how many times I've been teaching in the last year that were like, oh, well, that's irrelevant. Oh, that's irrelevant. Oh, here's something new that they need to learn. And it's all, something new will come up and we'll say like, oh, hey, remember last week when we told you this thing, you couldn't do that? Well, actually, now you can.
Yeah.
This was a design system thing where it's like, oh, well, you can't move things. I forget if it was, you can't move things from Claude to Figma, but you couldn't move things back, and now you can. And so it was like,
Yeah.
oh, God damn it. We just told you couldn't do that, but now you can. So
Yeah.
roll back
What's
and
it?
do it.
What's interesting, you describing those prior technology shifts, those different paradigm shifts that you've been through. What lessons or things from those previous shifts feel relevant, and what are just some like good sturdy things that feel it's like, ah, yes, this is same as it ever was. It doesn't matter, like if we're talking about, this thing versus these other shifts.
I mean, one thing is a weird cultural thing. And I did want to talk about this with you because you've kind of talked about this on previous ones of these. And there's always a group of people that are like, this is terrible. This is evil. We're not doing this. We hate this. We hate anyone involved in this. You're ruining everything. And you're a terrible person if you advocate doing this thing.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember people saying this web thing, it's a fad, it's going away. And then I remember I had this friend who worked at Nokia, and they were like, yeah, the iPhone does everything. The N series Nokia, we've done all this for years. This is not a big deal. Like just just those kinds of reactionary things where it's like, well, we're just gonna put the genie back in the bottle, and it's like, how? That's always my question. Is like, okay, this thing is out there. There's momentum. People are using it. What's the plan for you to be like, I'm not gonna use this. I'm gonna disregard this. I'm not gonna have it in my work. I'm not gonna think about it. I'm gonna fight it really hard. And I get that there are clearly a lots of negatives with this technology. I get
Yes.
it. I'm very cognizant of it, and I think we should definitely talk about that in terms of the kind of like metacognitive laziness that it is definitely. That's the thing that's making me sweat at night, is this pushing the sparkle button, having everything done for you, and being like, it's done, call it a day, which I think is incredibly dangerous. And I worry about that almost more than I worry about AI taking a whole bunch of jobs. I worry that it is a dumbing down machine, the likes of which we have never seen in our entire lives. And there's been a lot of research that really supports that theory.
Yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
see in my students, I can see some of them are definitely using the tool and they are just not retaining anything.
Yeah.
And I also, and we'll get more into that, I'm sure, but I also, I get the, hey, this was built on a lot of stolen material. Some of it was my stolen material. It was my
Like
books
same.
went into it. I mean, I'm sure your book went
Yeah.
in, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm not happy about that. I'm going to be extremely glad when I get my check from some of these lawsuits. I'm looking forward to that.
Amazing.
But there is just so much interesting potential when used well and employed correctly in the right contexts with the right guardrails installed. I think that there's just I personally would be very upset if some of these tools went away, and
Yeah.
that's just where I'm at, and I have sympathy for the anti-AI people, but then I'm also like, I don't understand you. I also, some of the people that run these companies are fucking terrible people, but that I would not cross the street if they were choking. But but
Yeah.
I am not going to throw the technology under the bus because a lot of those reasons.
And again, it all just comes back to nuance. We need to be able to spell it out and really validate the people who are receiving it, rejecting it, and looking at the truth of a lot of what being said, even if you're not necessarily coming to the same conclusion of like, ah, yes, and that means that we all need to put this away. Let's expose these very damning and real risks, at an environmental level, at a strip mining the global south and doing there's so much there across the board, and there's so many real risks, and there's so many like sort of unknown risks. And whenever you see the total and complete dismissal of I watched this video, and it was a dude who was like talking to Chat GPT, and he's like, all right, I'm about to run a mile, tie me. And then he just goes, whew, I'm back, like immediately after. And he goes, what was my time? It's like, you ran that mile in 10 minutes and 47 seconds. And he's like, are you sure about that? Like, I feel like I like ran it faster. He's like, no, I'm really positive that this is 10 minutes and 47 seconds. That video is shown to Sam Altman, and the immediate dismissal, the immediate is like, I like, that's like not a big deal. It's like, dude, like, it's okay to be like, yeah, we got some work to do. Like, this is still powerful, but like the immediate like dismissal of the real risks and downsides, like that is so incredibly damaging. And to be in that kind of position and to just be swatting away any and all valid criticism or exposing of the real limitations of this, that's reckless and irresponsible. They're just like wholesale. So it's like, so how do we expose that stuff, steer that stuff, but in our own personal work, and application of it, which there's a lot of pressure. All of your students going out into the workforce, it's like they need to be, this is now part of pretty much every single job posting or LinkedIn thing or whatever. So it's like to say, oh yeah, there are these bad things, so therefore I'm not going to go near it, is in a lot of ways like career suicide for people just entering their career, but also for the people that we see day in and day out are under just so much pressure to get their heads around it and to figure it out. So we have to be able to take it all in and to not dismiss it. And it's an uncomfortable place to be because humans like resolution. It's just like we like being like, it's this or it's that. And with something that is this kind of powerful and malleable and whatever, this disconnect where it's like we see this real potential for it to be wielded intentionally and put in the right context and done certain, done in a certain way, all of this potential, we need to also be clear-eyed about the risks. It's a really place to be.
Yeah, I mean, just this week, the website called AI Death Count or something like that was launched, where it was cataloging all the different deaths that had happened just from, I don't even think it was from like Waymos hitting people or Teslas and all, I think it was more like straight up like through chat type discussions. And it's like in the hundreds. It's like 300 plus people. That's dangerous. That is a dangerous technology, and I get it. And there needs to be regulation guardrails around that. I mean, unfortunately, we are just in the absolute worst time period in the United States for that kind of regulation. When you have people whispering at the highest levels of government, "Don't regulate this thing, otherwise China's going to win." They have made the determination that several hundred people dying is fine.
Those several hundred people, unfortunately, are the canaries in the coal mine of like, just look at where it's going. It's like, is this becoming more adopted, more popular, or less popular? And, the answer is clearly like, this is where this stuff is going. And yeah.
Well, I have a weird data point for that,
Okay.
which is I think everyone 30 and older, maybe up to like age, I don't know, 60 or something like that, is like
Okay.
is yes, adoption's going up, use is going up.
Hmm.
I think the young Gen Z or the Gen Zs, they are very anti-AI. I mean, certainly not my students at Carnegie Mellon because they're Carnegie Mellon students, and so they are. Although certainly plenty of my students are very skeptical, but they are tend to be very kind of technical
Yeah.
people, the ones that I teach. But I talk to a number of people, and my daughter and her friends are all in that age group, and they are very anti-AI.
Yeah.
They are very much against it. They see it as something that is taking jobs. They see, especially their jobs, their entry level jobs are all being sucked into this thing.
Yep.
They are seeing that it is environmentally destructive, which they are acutely aware of, having grown up in an era where climate change is everywhere. And
Yep.
then they're like, well, and it's stealing people's work. So they are
Yep.
very anti. There's a very loud, vocal anti-AI group amongst the youngs.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's an interesting data point to put in there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think they
And
also feel like people like you and I and are and I don't know, Sam Altman are like shoving it down their throats, and they're like,
yeah.
we're done, stop doing this.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's I think back to the nuance point is it's like they are 100% right around again like triple underscoring all of those very real and very important downsides of this stuff,
mhm.
and was recently talking with someone who she's like, yeah, she framed herself in a very wonderful way where she's like, I grew up like was like a young adult in like the ad busters age where it's just like
Mhm.
like kind of,
Mhm.
and I was like that says everything, right? And I'm like to the point where I'm like wanting to get a dumb phone and all of that. She's really like turning back
Right.
the clock and stuff, but at the same time she's like, yeah, I'm like a small business owner, and I'm like just even the thought of losing predictive text, and she's like, I tried it and I was like, it's just like I couldn't like do it. And so a lot of this again like really requires having these kinds of conversations to go like, yes, that stuff is like really really horrible and needs to be addressed. It needs to be put front and center. And also, here are these like ways to use like the very technology itself to help mitigate that stuff and to like pay it down, because these tools are actually really powerful at that. Like I've been like starting to explore that world a little bit. There's some other work being done in like the around responsible UX and like responsive just like more like that sort of stuff. Like all to say again, it's all freaking fuzzy because the same technology that is like dumbing people down is the same technology that's being pointed at doing things like eradicating diseases that have been hard to
Hard
eradicate
to
to
reach.
date.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, I mean that is also something that we should probably have caveat with this, and I always try to pound this into my students' heads that AI isn't just LLMs and this kind of monolith. It is actually a collection of technologies, some of which we've been using now for a decade. And
Or
predictive
longer.
text,
Yeah.
you mentioned it,
Yep.
and it was like that. You want to get rid of predictive text? No. Would you like to look into your photos and find all the pictures of your dog? Yes. I mean, there are so many applications of AI, and whether we call it, machine learning
Yep.
or AI or whatever it is, that is extremely, extremely valuable, and it is just working behind the scenes
Yes.
to make things more efficient and better and more personalized and
Yep.
faster and smarter. And that's where we need to lean in a lot more and less about, maybe slightly less about kind of the LLM's giant foundation models part of the world, because
Yep.
that gets
Yep.
enough attention. The other really valuable stuff sometimes gets kind of lost in the shuffle,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hard to reconcile those two sometimes. But you need to pull back and look at the broader AI landscape sometimes.
Well, it just broader technology landscape, I think, in general, too, because I think that this is like one of the biggest things that I'm finding as I dig into this new era is just the fact that these things compound, right? Things like email exist and are still being developed, even though it's like relatively mature. But like these things are like living, breathing systems and technologies, phones and mobile technology, living, breathing entities that, its own technology, right? The World Wide Web, right? Things are being added to this all the time. Like these things are still here, and it's everything in aggregate becomes our ingredients for mass extinction, or if you take a more optimistic route, like all of these tools and technologies and creative materials to really make the world a better place, and so that really feels like the act of design anymore, because what this new paradigm unlocks is for a lot of designers and creative people, developers and other folks to have access to these other technologies in ways that weren't that were off limits before. Like you're like, oh, I would have loved to make a video game, but I couldn't possibly know how to do that. I don't come from a computer science background, because I think that a
Hmm.
lot of people are still in like, I'm a UX designer and I'm like a front end developer, or like I'm like this, and there is still very much the need for specialty, but I do think that there's a broadening of the lens that I think is really necessary for people to let in, so that they can give themselves permission to solve more problems in more areas, or at least participate in that, and that there's like a lot more room for overlap with a lot of different specialists. Historically, we've been this was like one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you, is like you kind of talking about the changing design process. And here's the double diamond, and here's like all of like this stuff, and here's like these like handoffs, and there's these here's how this works. And we're now at a place where it's just like all of that is now like totally up in the air. And so that, yeah, like what is the designer anymore? What is the design process anymore? How do we sort of like take all of this in and try to make sense of it?
It's funny that you say that, because I literally woke up this morning. Well, I got this new dog,
It's
it's a
adorable,
rescue.
by the way.
It's
It's
a
very
rescue dog.
beautiful.
Yeah, she's very cute. But she has a tendency to get up at like 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and then six. And then sometimes I can't get back to sleep. And this morning, she had woken me up, and I was kind of like, and man, like my mind was like, I was like redrawing double diamonds and like making new double, like I was like trying to be like, well, what is replacing? So I was like literally trying to solve this problem in my mind at 5 a.m. this morning. So I don't know, maybe that's what's keeping me up at night. And it's actually the dog that's keeping me up at night. But when I'm awake at
Beautiful.
night, this is where my mind is going. It's like, what
Beautiful.
is, how do we even diagram that? But to get back to your point, like I think one of the things about this era, and it's kind of widening the aperture to people who are able to do the kind of work that we do, but they can aim it at things that we are frankly too expensive or too out, like no one's going to hire a large agency to make a tiny app for their small NGO or their small
Yep.
nonprofit, or
Yep.
all these kinds of little things that people can now do quickly on their own, and it looks good enough, it works good enough. It's not for mass production. It is
Yep.
small for their one particular need, and I think that is very empowering.
Yes.
And if I, as a small owner of or a general manager, whatever, running a small nonprofit, and I can have make my own quick app that does this very particular thing for me and maybe the people that I'm serving or my workers or whatever, that's really a great thing. I mean, much less at the kind of like, as you were talking about, the kind of macro level where it's like, can we turn this thing towards solving climate change? Can we turn this thing to solving, grid power and stuff like that? Although
Yes.
that used my big hope. But since 2016, I have lost all hope. So I
Yeah.
don't think that I don't. The problem is never the technology, right? The
That's
problem
right.
is always the political will to use the technology in
Yeah.
ways that are not capitalistic, or in ways that are, I don't know, that don't serve to reinforce the existing power structure. And I
Yes.
think that is
Yeah.
that's
It,
a real problem.
this is I'm going to share my screen just because you're hitting on like a lot of where I'm going with a lot of this stuff, right? In order to demonstrate and to teach these concepts, it as of very recently kind of announced that I'm like not going to be doing kind of like client work, right? But I want to continue to help teach and teach people and plug into these things to different organizations. But exactly what you said is like, oh, okay, all of a sudden these things are now a lot more accessible to more people, and that you could point them at these things like, really good small businesses or nonprofits and sort of mission oriented things, the same people that really struggle with, having the funds to do this stuff because of the existing power structures. And so to sort of teach empowerment. So my wife is a counselor. She's an arts therapist and counselor, and she has been tasked with kind of helping with marketing the practice, right? Small business, doing a lot of good in the Pittsburgh area, right? Helping get people mental health services and all sorts of good stuff. This is their website. Leaves a lot to be desired. It's like an old school kind of like Wix website, again, kind of best intentions by the owner, and I've talked to her, so I feel fine like sharing this. But it was actually through our conversation that I had like with the owner, but then me and my wife sat down and we had a working session on this where it's like, okay, like let's dig in here and talk more about the goals that she had sort of spelled out. She is talking about her values and the owner, and she was, just really, really beautiful values, right? Like nonviolence and inclusion and helping everybody and meeting you where you are and trying to make getting mental health care less scary and stuff like that. Just some of the most beautiful stuff. But when we go to the contact page, and again, like forgive me, Andrea in general, to use this as a thing, but we're working on this, and I think it's really like telling. But it's like, here's this Wix website that she put together, and this isn't necessarily like a dig at Wix, but this is just like, she's not a professional web designer developer,
Right, right.
and
She just
and
had this was the tools that she had,
this is it. This
and
is it.
it was
This is
good
it.
enough. Yeah.
And but so you're like, okay, I need this care, right? And then it's like, oh, and we want to be inclusive, we want to be accessible, we're committed to helping everybody, and we want to make this whole process like less scary. So one, there's some pretty serious accessibility issues where this is the actual form just kind of literally buried in the trees.
Right. Yeah.
But then you have this scary language here, and you're like, oh my God, this unencrypted email continued despite those risks and stuff like that. And so you're like, okay, so that runs just fully counter to this beautiful mission that the owner is saying. So we're like, okay, well, in an hour long session, and this is like 1 hour of work, and it is none of this is meant to go out into the world, but this is something that is a step in the right direction to help put this stuff in align the company that's doing this community service to the greater Pittsburgh area, to align how it's represented online to the community that it's serving, and to create something that just feels way more accessible and way more friendly and all of that stuff, like it's
welcoming,
like,
and easy to use, and all those things, right? And an hour, right? In an
hour. So we have like a follow-up session, right? So my wife, her boss, and me will get together. We'll start dialing this stuff in, but we'll basically be, going through and all of this stuff is born from the context of the conversation, which I also think is like very, very fascinating, where it's like, this isn't just like, if you look at this homepage and these values, these are just straight up from our conversation. Like, it's like kind of like word for word coming from the owner's mouth and translated online. So did AI write this? Yes, it technically did, but like, it's a lot closer to, because this was born from a conversation. I'm super fascinated by that, because people who run nonprofits, people who run mission-oriented small businesses, people doing a lot of good, they can articulate what they want. And that's historically been the thing that, the agencies of the world, have been sort of having to take and interpret and then reflect. And it goes through this like layer of translation. When it comes out the other end, might end up looking pretty different than what the vision of the mission is. Mm-hmm. And so what I love about this is this flattening, more participatory, more democratized, more multidisciplinary, like just everything. We're just all able to jump into the fray together, and instead just like kind of like focus on like accomplishing this organization's mission, rather than getting tripping up over the mechanics of it, or sort of saying, okay, this person needs to, we walk away from this meeting and we're all eager to get off of the call so that we could go put our heads down and do that work. Like, no, now the meeting is the working session. Like, it's like we're literally like working together now, instead of this whole like, I can't wait to get off this call so I could go back and put my headphones on, work in isolation, and then hand it over to a developer later. It's like, nope, we actually can all just sort of jump in together and do good work together. And I'm like super jazzed up about that.
And in an hour, you're able
in a freaking hour.
Right. That's the amazing thing. And it's, I mean, this writing project that I'm working on, I mean, I'm a slow writer. And so if I have a 500 word day, that's a pretty good day for me. So I am just, I'm just a little grinder away on cranking out words. But to have help creating some of these words and then editing them and refining them myself and adding in my own pieces and doing that so that I can get, that I can double my output or triple my output is amazing to me. It is just an accelerant to what I can do with my own talents, much less when I'm like, hey, I built an app the other day, and I'm like, which I am never going to do on my own. That is a completely outside my realm. I mean, I wouldn't say completely, but it would take me a year to build the thing that I built in a weekend. Right. I mean, so that's that is just a very interesting space about enhancing
Yep.
your abilities. And I mean, we should talk about this for a sec, but it just I know that there is just this really hatred towards AI slop, and I get it. I hate it too. I do not. I absolutely hate AI slop. But then I'm also like, okay, I know that there is a percentage of things that I'm reading right now that were generated by AI, and I'm still getting a lot of value out of it. How, so is it just Sturgeon's law where 90% of everything is crap? That still applies. 90% of everything that's out there is crap. Just, a lot of it's made by AI now, and there's still this 10% that is actually valuable. And does it matter if it is AI generated or human generated or some kind of hybrid in
Yeah.
between?
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, well, if I found value in it, and if it's not like stealing somebody else's work uh, or or malicious or misinformation or whatever, or feeding me like,
Yep.
what's the difference? I don't know. Maybe I'm just tilting that way because I'm also like, I went to the Andy Warhol Museum here in town. Since you and I are both Yinzers, you
If you're out of town, if you're in Pittsburgh, go to the Andy Warhol Museum.
it
It's
is
phenomenal.
great. He did a whole series on wigs because he was a little bit obsessed with his hairline. So he did this thing on wigs, and I'm reading the description. It's a giant painting, and it's a projector. He used a projector to project these images onto the painting and then painted them. And I'm like, well, isn't this using technology to do something? Like
Yeah.
this is enhancing his ability with technology. And I'm like, well, of
Yeah.
course, Andy Warhol 100% would have used AI to do things. No question in my mind that he would. I mean, he was doing stuff on the Amiga for God's sake in the
Yeah.
80s. So
Yeah.
I think that I don't know. I think this distinction that we have between technology and art is is a false one. It's a false
Yep.
dichotomy where it's you can't like I mean you can't have movies or television or radio or any of those things without technology. It
Yep.
does not exist. We couldn't be doing this. You wouldn't be listening to this. All this stuff
Yep.
is completely technology enabled. And if I don't like, I just don't think we're that long from watching a really good AI movie that is the product of an auteur who has had a vision to make a movie and just uses the tools and makes an incredible movie from AI. I think we're 2 years from that. I just don't. And I think that people will be like, "Oh my God, this is amazing," and it will be. And I think the same is true for a lot of things that are not performing arts, and maybe some even performing arts. There was that big country hit, right? That was an AI generated. It's like a all AI country band. I think you probably know more than this than I do.
I did. Yeah, I did see that go through my headlines. I didn't click into it, but country music is kind of beautifully formulaic, or modern country, I should say. So it's like it doesn't surprise me.
Right, but I mean, it is, and if people are enjoying it and finding value in it, I guess the argument is, well, that's taking away from actual country music artists.
That's the thing that is, once again, I think, like, yep, that's right to call that stuff out.
Hmm.
Where it's just like the Sunos of the world. It's like, oh, okay, there's like a whole class of musicians that are, making a living, putting that kind of like background music that, shows up in so many different places and stuff like that. And those are real livelihoods. My brother and I went and saw the band Snarky Puppy at the Roxy Theater, which is an amazing
Hmm.
venue in McKees Rocks here in Pittsburgh. He had a bit at the end Michael Lee, and I really want to have him and chat with him here because I love his take on everything. He does such a great job at articulating what it's like to be a working musician. Success, they have multiple Grammys and all of this stuff and all of this stuff, but it's like they're talking about just the work and those power dynamics and just saying like they're under a lot of pressure to like get off of Spotify because of all of like the crappy reasons and all of that stuff, and they're like, look, it's just the math, here's the dynamics, and like we kind of need your help to make that decision easier for us and stuff like just beautiful stuff like that. But on stage he was basically like he was like, as of this year it seemed like a threshold was crossed where listening to this generated music and you're like, that's good. And he's like, and I got ears, there are 10 freaky people on stage, some of the most talented musicians in the world, all just taking people through the roof, like just tremendously gifted. And he's like, this is the year that it was like, it went from just like, here's some just kind of crap and like, oh, isn't that cute, into, oh, that's genuinely good. But it's also, it's safe, it's predictable. And so what what he said was, now that this AI generated stuff comes in and is just producing kind of middle of the road averages of what these different things could do, right? Here's a middle of the road country song. Here's a middle of the road like pop song. Here's a middle of the road, whatever. He's like, we got to get freaking weird. And I'm like, yeah, dude, like that's it. Like this is the thing. It's happened across the arc of all of technology, but I'll sort of focus on photography's introduction, right? And Andy Warhol's like swept up in that a little bit, but like when photography was introduced, an entire class of landscape portrait painters, people that were capturing the reality of the world, right, through the available technologies
right.
of the time, which, by the way, that got there's another technology, the collapsible tin tube, right? Like the little squeezy tube that our toothpaste comes in, and like oil paste. Before that was totally prohibited. So like everything had to take place in a painter's studio. The introduction of the collapsible tin tube allowed people like Claude Monet to be able to go out into nature and to capture nature in its place in a way that wasn't possible before. But then photography comes along and all of a sudden takes this thing that was already happening with Impressionism, where it's getting a little bit more abstracted. And when here comes this medium that kind of faithfully captures reality, or to our human eyes closer than an oil painting, all of a sudden the painters are like, oh shit, we got to get weird here. Like we can no longer like sort of just faithfully capture this stuff, even though there's still like a tremendous gift in that photorealism, and that actually came back around in the postmodernism era and stuff like that. But like the ability to just go, oh, okay, my living is just painting this portrait and try to get as close to real as possible has now been disrupted. Mm-hmm. And so what that did, though, was it was a forcing function for art to get weird. And it did. And it did get weird. And we are the beneficiaries of that weirdness. And it widens and broadens our scope of what we're capable of doing. It's really fascinating stuff, because it's like none of this is new, but this is definitely supercharged of what we're living through right now.
I feel this way about my own writing and I've heard other writers talk about this too, where they have definitely leaned into the most idiosyncratic parts of their work, of their style, I know it myself, where I'm just like, well, only I would have connected these two things, or this is not something that an AI would have come up with, or an AI would never have done this structure of how these things are put together. So I feel like, and for me, it's small, like stylistic choices or topic choices or really leaning heavier to make my voice more mine,
More
even
you.
if,
Yeah.
even if I am working with an AI to get
Yep.
that, the polish afterward is to remove the AI isms and to make
Yep.
it more mine, to make it more my
Yep.
voice, my vision of what it should be. And I find that I'm taking that to be more me. Like I am pushing
Yep.
it to be
Yep.
slightly weirder, slightly harder,
Yep. Yep.
slightly rougher and unpolished because yeah, I want it to feel like a human being made it. And
Let the weird in. Yeah.
maybe that's because I'm in my fuck it phase and yeah, I'm like and maybe it's because my dog keeps waking me up in
Maybe
the
you're
middle of
just
the
sleep
night
deprived.
and I'm just sleep deprived and cranky. I haven't been this sleep deprived, I think, since I had a young child. I'm just like,
Oh my goodness. She'll find her rhythm and you guys will you'll both get better sleep soon. So
I am hoping because there's the whole 3-3-3 thing where it's like you 3 days they're in shock, 3 weeks they kind of understand what's going on, and then 3 months they've settled down, and
there we
we're
go.
only a month and a half in. So
We could superimpose that onto what we've been talking about today. It's like it feels like there's some of these like kind of things where it's like there's kind of the initial shock of like this brand new paradigm just kind of like landing at our feet and like kind of figuring out like we're all just dazed and a lot of us are still kind of in that phase, but then there is this like kind of this that middle three where it's like some people are like going okay, like I'm starting to get a feel for this environment, like good, bad, and the ugly, and then it's like the next phase eventually will be like something that feels like yes, okay, I've like integrated these things into my
right.
my work and life in a different way. I don't know.
It's a good analogy. The one thing that they say that really helps getting a dog to be settled, a rescue dog to be settled, is a very calm routine. And that's where this metaphor breaks down because new stuff keeps coming at us. Like,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
definitely through that initial shock, but the like, oh, we're settling in a routine that can,
yeah.
even in, as I was saying today, I'm like, you took my model away from me and you gave me garbage. I gotta, how do I rectify that?
Yeah, no, it's very true, and I think that is testament to something that I would like quick to remind a lot of people, especially whether it's our students or whether it's just like a lot of people that we talk to, that everyone at a societal level I think feels pretty overwhelmed right now, and I'm like, yeah, we are like orders of magnitude out of our depths, out of our like neurological and biological like depths here. Like we were not designed for the world that we're inhabiting right now, and that's coming back to some of like the scary bits of this stuff is that we are in uncharted waters in so many respects, right? Because like all you need to do is rewind a number of generations and what, 5, 10, maybe 15, and you're like, what my grandfather did is what my father did is what I'm going to do is what my son's going to do, and there's like some form of predictability there, and now it's just like nope, like the students you're teaching now are going to enter a workforce that like we literally can't say like this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, no,
It's like it's crazy,
absolutely.
nuts.
I mean, if you think about like 5 years ago, if I would have come to you and been like, you know what, that 10-page report you got to write. What if I gave you a button and you could push it and it would write that report for you right now? And it's like, well, that seems like magic. And it's like, well, yes. Of course, now it's also like, well, half of it would be bad. The other half
Yep.
would be amazing. But, but in 5 years, maybe it will be all amazing. And then what happens there? Like what are
What are
we
we
doing
doing?
then? And I think
Yep.
that's the real thing. And to get back to, an earlier topic that I said that we would circle back to. Yeah, is this big chunk of piece where it's like where the actual work disappears, and that is challenging at an individual level and at a societal level, because what that's really starting to erode is expertise, and what you really need with these systems is expertise and judgment to be able to determine if this is good or not.
Yep.
Is this doing the thing that I want to? And all the studies lately have been like about that you, by pushing the button and uncritically accepting what comes out, is completely eroding any kind of learning, any kind of thoughtfulness, and creativity. It's all just like flatlining because nothing is being gained except you are teaching yourself to push the button. And so I think the real design challenge in the next couple of years is how do we stop that? How do we put guardrails around that so that we are not automating all the things that are important to check, to understand, to monitor, to make a decision about? I'm 100% fine with getting rid of the things that are tedious, and if I never have to fill out another form, I'm perfectly happy with that. If I never have to make a phone call to make an appointment, I am 100% happy with that. Please give that to me now. If I never have to drive another car, I'm happy with that. I'd much rather be, doom scrolling on my phone as I'm being driven somewhere. But when you start taking away the things that are meaningful, that's when the machine runs you. And that's what I am very worried about, is becoming more cog-like in the machine. And then the machine is run by, as we've talked about before, some awful people who want to do awful things and who do not care about your humanity, only about building the machine. And that's not a great place to be in. And so I think some of it is, how do we ensure, if the government's not going to do it, how do we ensure that we are not stripping away the things that make us the most human in service of the machine? How do we find in each of these moments, which is hard because these are very adaptable machines, how do we know what are the things that people really want to stay in touch with and keep doing and keep thinking about and learn, because otherwise you don't grow, you stagnate, you are the couch potato in front of your life, where all you're doing is hitting that approve button, approve. That's the grim note that I want to end, or as a call to arms, really. As
it is a call to arms, and I could spin it really well, which is like, I think when you find yourself in those positions of just like pushing the button and you feel weird about that, you feel not so good about it, it's like those are very important signals to listen to. Those are the things that it's like, I feel like something's being lost here. I don't feel like this is accelerating or amplifying my humanity, or my team's humanity, or the humanity, capital H humanity. I feel like this is just kind of running through some motions or letting some things that shouldn't be on autopilot go on autopilot. So it's like that signal, that discomfort, right? And as we've kind of talked about, whether it's with Gen Z or with like other people, and like, it just like that discomfort, very, very important to listen to those feelings. Those, like, as my wife has done a good job of teaching me as kind of the ride along for, a therapist training. It's like your feelings are valid, and they absolutely are. And the important work that people do in therapy, but just in our day-to-day experience, is to use those feelings as signals to get closer to the truth. And what you're highlighting here is a need for us to really hone in on and dial in on it. I think that this is happening right now. We're getting at what makes us uniquely human. Like, what are the things, what are the activities, the things that, like, that can't be just kind of replicated and we push a button for, and how do we really steer this entire arc of technology towards enhancing and elevating our humanity, using it to arrive us all at better outcomes at an individual level and at a societal level. Where does that leave us in, like, back to just the apparatus that is education and stuff like that? It's like the freaking humanities, man. It's like, for the longest time, I feel like those, and all of just those Psych 101 classes, those Philosophy 101 classes, all of those arts classes, all of those music classes, guess what? There's the answer right there. That is like, what's all this for? What's this giant machine for? And so we need to, like, refocus, or at the very least, like, introduce that entire world into this thing. Like, fuck STEM. Like, fuck STEM. Like, right. Like, and it's not to say that that doesn't matter, but it's incomplete. It is incomplete. It does not tell the full story of the human experience. And the humanities for have just been kind of sidelined from these conversations, because it's like, we're over here and we're building the machines, and we know the EFL statements, and we know how to do the actual work, and so you're going to be, like, left in the dust. But as we just saw, and talked about today, no longer the case. All of those people can participate because they are able to articulate those values, articulate that judgment, articulate the need for human expression and for goodness and ethical behavior. And we need to articulate that stuff in the process of these things, actually just these giant machines that we're able to do. This is all born from the nuance that we've been talking about throughout this entire conversation, which is like, it's not a 1 or 0. We can't fully reject this. We can't, like, just sort of sweep all of, like, the real hard stuff under the rug. We have to actively steer it, and we need the entirety of humanity to help steer it.
Yeah. 20 years ago, I was really annoyed, and because people kept being like, design is all about problem solving. And I'm like, yeah. My dad's a plumber. That's some real problem solving. And I said, the real point of design is to make the future more humane. And I feel like that has never been more true than right now. And I think that's the call to arms that we need to keep in mind.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. Ooh, beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, that feels like a good note to end on. So before we wrap up, what music do you want more people to know about?
So I love a band from the late 80s, early 90s called World Party. And World Party is basically a one-man band by a man named Carl Wallinger. And he was also in the band The Waterboys, an excellent 80s band that I also recommend you check out. I was very upset because I had World Party blasting because it was a lovely day here. I had the windows rolled down on my car, just driving to work. And I was like, oh, I wonder if World Party is even touring anymore. And so I look up, and turns out Carl Wallinger died in 2024 of unknown causes. I was like, how did I miss this? I was very sad. I'm like, this is a band I listen to. I follow music blogs. I follow, I have all this stuff. And how did this piece of information make its way past me, which I would have found is very important, very meaningful to me. And so that is something I wish that we had systems to collect the things that are meaningful and present them to me at the appropriate time. And but I really recommend that everyone listen to some World Party. I recommend starting with Goodbye Jumbo, which is one of their biggest albums. Message in a Box is on that. Their other big hit, Ship of Fools, is really catchy. And so hat tip to World Party and Waterboys and Rest in peace, Carl Wallinger.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you for that. Definitely, I've heard the Water Boys before, at least like kind of come across my radar, but not World Party. So we'll give a listen. So
Give it a listen. You will not be disappointed. It's very Beatlesy, especially John Lennon influenced.
okay,
So if you like that kind of thing, it's very good, very sharp.
beautiful, amazing. All right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining. Last quick question is like, where can people follow along with you? Where are you active? Where you want to sort of steer people to your work? And
Definitely check out the AI and Design Pod, which is aianddesignpod.com. Also, you can find it on Spotify and Apple and everywhere that you listen to your podcasts. It's probably on there. And otherwise, yeah, I mostly post on LinkedIn these days and on Blue Sky as well.
fantastic. Well, thank you, Dan. This has been tremendous in a great way. We're recording this on a Friday, and head into the weekend, catch up on your sleep, and enjoy Pittsburgh. The sun is actually
The
out.
sun
For a
is out.
change.
Right. Great. Thank you, Brad.
All right, thank you. Take care.